Welcome to the Top 5 Risk Avoidance Strategies for Contractors, a webinar brought to you by AIA Contract Documents. Before we get started, a few introductory items. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you by the end of the week. We have all attendees currently muted. If there's time permitting at the end of the webinar, we will answer any questions, so please feel free to enter any questions in the chat or question pod in your GoToWebinar window on the right-hand side. The PowerPoint from today's presentation is under the handout section. Without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over now to our presenter, Andy Mendelson. Andy?
Thank you, Hosty, and thanks to you and AIA Contract Documents to invite me into this presentation today. A few introductory comments from me. Construction projects are inherently risky. Every project is unique, even if it is a prototype, due to varying site and other conditions, local codes and ordinances, and just the unpredictable nature of design and construction. Projects continue to evolve in complexity, with increasing owner expectations such as sustainability and energy performance, resilient design to withstand severe weather events due to climate change, and demands for acceleration of project schedules. In 2020 and 21, and continuing into this year, 2022, additional risk issues emerged due to COVID-19, disrupting access to construction sites, increasing sanitation and hygiene at the site, and in particular, significant disruption in the supply chain of materials, systems, and products, contributing to high rates of construction inflation. Regarding risk allocation, our perspective is that the primary beneficiaries of the project are the owner and the users, particularly when you consider the long life of a building or infrastructure project. Yes, design firms and construction managers get paid a fee for services, and contractors earn fees and profit on the construction cost. But the primary value is to the owner. Therefore, owners must take the majority of the risk on a project, establish realistic project criteria and expectations for budget, scope, and quality, as well as schedule. They also have to ensure that the project is properly funded and financed, and establish and maintain contingencies as part of their project budget. That being said, the contractor, construction managers, and design team are part of the owner's risk management team, and we're expected to have skills and experience in order to provide expertise and services and fulfill contractual obligations towards a satisfactory project result for the owner. Contractors accept significant risk in this process, particularly the obligation to construct the project in accordance with the plans, specs, and other contract documents for the price agreed upon. Whether that is a fixed price, also known as lump sum, cost plus a fee with a GMP, or price certain through design build. Berkeley Alliance managers and Berkeley Construction Professional encourage our insurers to establish a risk management policy and plan for your firm. A risk management policy and plan for your company is an essential element of loss prevention and a key ingredient of financial success. When your risk management plan is embraced by leadership and integrated into your company's culture, it will have a significant positive impact on business performance. We view risk management as an integral component of business project and financial management. Today's presentation illustrates 5 key risk avoidance strategies for contractors and construction managers. My name is Andrew Mendelson. I am the Chief Risk Management Officer of Berkeley Alliance Managers, which consists of Berkeley Design Professional and Berkeley Construction Professional, as well as a couple of other subdivisions we have dealing with service professionals and our underwriters in London. Before joining Berkeley in 2013, I was a licensed architect for over 36 years in practice. It's a pretty wide variety of experience I had in project management, practice management. I was a market leader for one of our key markets. And then I evolved to a corporate-wide managing principal in large A&E practice. We had in-house mechanical, structural, and electrical, plumbing, engineering, as well as architecture and interiors. Originally contracting officer, and then also CFO, And then when our firm merged into Canon Design, I was Director of Practice Management for Canon for about 4 years before joining Berkeley. Along the way, I put a strong focus on risk management, joining AIA Documents Committee as part of an offshoot of the AIA's Large Firm Roundtable Legal Committee. A couple of us were invited into Documents Committee, and I served for 15 years as a primary author of owner-architect agreements that were pretty significantly updated in 2007, and then continuing through all the different delivery methods and the relaunch of the A201 family in 2017. Since joining Berkeley, I've become more active on the engineering side as an active member in the ACEC Risk Management Committee. So our approach is we're delivering risk management education from the practitioner's perspective. We have been able to attain a status of being a leading provider of professional liability insurance to both design and the construction markets. My colleagues in underwriting and claims all have significant experience and expertise in this area. And we have real-world risk management education. A quick word about AI documents, which continue to be industry standard form documents originally established in 1888. In the process of creating new and updated agreements, AIA receives, analyzes, and incorporates input from a broad range of construction industry organizations and attorneys representing contractors, subcontractors, owners, and developers, as well as engineers and architects. The goal for these contracts are to be fair and balanced and insurable. It's an iterative drafting process, receiving all this input and making decisions that we feel are in the best interest of the industry. The documents are updated every 10 years. The A201 family was updated in 2017, and that's the conventional design, bid, build process of project delivery. And all of the owner-contractor agreements, contractor-subcontractor agreements, various insurance and bond forms, and many other documents that support the construction industry. And of course, the design side, owner-architect agreement, architect-consultant, and the like. So it's a lot of work to coordinate all these documents with the stakeholders that we have, with the legal terms and conditions that are consistent throughout these families of documents. Relative to other aspects of construction, the construction manager documents were most recently updated just a couple of years ago in 2019. That's construction manager as advisor, construction manager as constructor, also known as CMAR or CMGC. And the design build documents were last updated in 2014, so they're getting close to being updated again on their 10-year cycle, and I've heard that maybe that may even be before 2014. So AI documents continue to be the industry-leading standard form documents. This is a typical legal disclaimer regarding legal advice that you may hear from me. This is risk management information only. It is not legal advice. Please consult with your attorney, experience with the laws and regulations of the jurisdiction of your office and where the projects are. Similarly, if I make some recommendations on practice management, again, review those relative to what is appropriate for your firm and to be established by you as a contractor or construction manager. So let's get to the meat of our program here. Here's the workshop outline for the 5 risk avoidance strategies. The first is stay focused. The second is regarding contracting and project approval. Third is maintaining staff resources and working with firms you know. Fourth, very importantly, actively managing your subcontractors. And finally, embedding quality and project delivery into the management and delivery process you have, no matter what the project type is. So let's start with this concept of being focused. Growth is good, right? It promotes advancement and development in the breadth of your firm's reach, enabling opportunities for your staff as well to grow. However, we feel it's important that you really not lose sight of the experience that you have and the expertise that you have developed as really a core essential to successful business practice. There's a considerable difference between public work and private work, as an example. I spent most of my practice career in the public works side, whether it be K-12 schools, public universities, libraries, village halls, police, fire, other local municipal projects. As I evolved in my firm towards a corporate-wide manager in a firm with a very strong healthcare practice and corporate practice, I learned more about those projects and more about the intricacies of private work versus public work. And we learned that in our local area, we were a Chicago-based firm with an office in Phoenix, Arizona. After we joined Canon, we became a global firm with over 15 offices. But we knew who the contractors were that were the right fit for those particular project types. And that did not mean that a contractor could not evolve to be a credible player in different markets. However, that expertise and skills that each of these contractors had in a particular project type was quite valuable for them in terms of establishing qualifications, proving qualifications, and being able to be successful in a competitive bid environment or a competitive negotiation situation. So don't ever lose sight with the core of your expertise and experience in the local market where you exist. You want to take on projects for which you have adequate capacity of leadership and staff. You all know this. This has been an industry-wide issue for perhaps over 10 years now, exacerbated through the pandemic as certain people have retired from the industry. I myself am in the baby boomer generation. My overall experience in the design and construction and insurance industry is over 45 years. So a lot of my colleagues and friends have retired, and that's a lot of expertise that's walking out the door of these firms. And while all of you are seeking to retain your talent and recruit new talent, it's been a challenge, and it's ongoing. So yet, in order to be successful in business and manage your risk, you must have adequate capacity of leadership and staff. We think it's also important, and on the focus perspective, to work with owners that you know and trust, to have the capability to implement the project type in the location where it will be built. Not all real estate developers have expertise in every project type. A real estate developer that does, freestanding office buildings may not be the same developer that has an expertise in multifamily housing. It's a different skill set, it's a different mindset, and it's a different project type from the standpoint of content and oftentimes quality. So let's try to work with owners that have that experience and the capabilities that you want them to have. And you also want owners that partner with contractors, construction managers, and design professionals fairly. We're looking for people that take a team approach, a collaborative approach, and are not highly litigious. We suggest that relationships are important, and we suggest that these relationships based on collaboration, cooperation, not conflict or confrontation, which is so common in so many construction projects, should be avoided. We want to treat everyone fairly. So, relative to expansion, keep a perspective from a strategic perspective of thinking globally and acting regionally. Globally, we mean what are the market opportunities for you as you decide to expand? And are you willing to make the investment to go into another jurisdiction, another city, another region, another country even? Everything is different in terms of the legal and regulatory environment. While there are commonalities in the United States, of course, from state to state, there are significant differences. As an example, as I started learning the healthcare business, healthcare organizations, whether they are full-blown hospitals, critical care units, whether even if they're ambulatory care centers or urgent care centers, they are regulated construction types. They're usually regulated by a Department of Public Health. Here in Illinois, where I live and work and have spent most of my career, we have an organization called the Illinois Department of Public Health, which has its own processes for project authorization at the institutional level. In other words, that healthcare organization needs to prove to IDPH that this particular region where they are proposing to build a new ambulatory care center or a new critical care center actually has the patient capacity and the need to build that facility. So that's really at the institutional level. Then you need to follow up with what are the actual parameters of the project that will be allowed to be built. And that's where the design team comes into play and the construction team comes into play to help provide advice to these owners for this type of project. And of course, a healthcare institution is a builder of many projects. There's been a lot of expansion and consolidation in this industry, and there's pretty much a continuous flow of work. So having long-term relationships with owners who build multiple projects is a good thing. It's also very common in the corporate world where you're doing facilities, maybe in your local area, and you have an opportunity to do a similar facility in another city or another state. And because you have that client relationship, you've got a lot of the basics covered for that. Getting back to healthcare, the difference between, say, Illinois, which I would consider to be a relatively easy state to work in, as compared to California, which has a very arduous process for getting healthcare projects approved. They have an organization called OSHPD, which has very stringent procedures and policies that add to the approval process in terms of time, of planning, design, and construction costs. And if their costs of projects are significantly higher than what we face in the Midwest. So again, the difference between legal and regulatory standards in a different state can be significant. When you do make a decision to expand to another area, try to be consistent with your company policies, processes, and protocols, as well as an integration plan for the new office, whether it's a satellite office that you've created organically. In other words, you're starting it under your own name. Maybe you've relocated one of your project executives or principals. We would certainly recommend that to lead any new office. Or maybe you have acquired a company and you want to integrate those policies and processes and procedures of the new office with those of the home office. Now, you do need to recognize that there can be some differences regionally in terms of the approach to the clients and, again, to the regulatory experience. But the majority of your policies, procedures, and protocols should be consistent and should be well established. Taking the time and investing senior resources to integrate that new office with the home office is very, very important. And finally, as I was saying on that earlier slide, don't lose sight of the strength and presence that you have in your local market, particularly if you're in a major metropolitan area. My own experience, having been the market leader in my firm's K-12 practice before I transitioned to a corporate management role, is that we had a very strong presence in our local market. You may almost want to say we were dominant. And what came with that was a regional and national reputation. So as we got called into project opportunities outside of Chicago in the Midwest region, we had some success in winning those projects, but unfortunately, it created an issue where we did not have enough senior leadership to maintain that strong presence we had in our local market. So from the standpoint of overall revenue within that market, it was a challenge to us because we were simply not able to replace the local revenue with as much on the national side. So be wary of that. And again, try to maintain that strength and presence in your local market as a core basis of your business. Okay, item number 2 is controlling your contracting and project approval process. As part of those standard business practices that you should establish and continue on to your remote offices, have a standard process for authorship review and approval of proposals and contracts. Contracts start with the proposals, right? They establish the scope of what you're going to do. They establish certain parameters for what you are proposing. They form the basis of a scope of services and intent of a contract. And then you need to get into the legal terms and conditions. It is recommended that you include your standard terms and conditions with the proposal so that your client understands what you're going to be expecting when you get into the contract negotiation. But you need to allow sufficient time for legal review and advice on contracts. If you're a larger construction firm or construction manager and have a devoted risk manager, contract coordinator, or maybe even an in-house general counsel, that's going to help you be efficient in that regard. If not, make sure you utilize the services of your outside counsel. The contract, of course, is the foundation for the relationship between you and your client, the project owner, and establishes the roles and responsibilities of all parties of the project. So consistently follow and enforce your protocols, even in a situation where maybe the market is down. And, the design and construction industry was pretty fortunate in 2020. About 2 years ago, we were right at the beginning of the pandemic, and there was a slowdown, a pause, maybe between March and July of 2020, but the design and construction industry rebounded quite robustly, starting on the design side and then on the construction side. And again, there were challenges with getting projects going and having workers being able to access the project sites, and the issues that I mentioned earlier in terms of site safety and access and sanitation and the number of workers on a site. But nonetheless, we were able to be flexible, and the economy has been quite robust since then. I encourage you to listen in on regular updates from AGC, as well as the AIA economists. These tend to be done on a quarterly basis or semi-annual basis, and they report very thoroughly on what's happening in the various regions and project types and the like. So again, things are busy, and your standard business protocols should be followed no matter what the project is, no matter what your workload is. So what's necessary in terms of proposals and contracts, the basics, intent and parameters of the project, scope, schedule, budget, the budget for the project and construction. And again, this is where the owner's realistic expectations and the realities of what's happening today from the standpoint, particularly of budget and schedule, given challenges of construction inflation. What about the project team? You are, as a contractor or CM, are impacted by the design team. Are these firms that you've worked with before? And do you have a good relationship with? Do they have a strong market presence? Do they treat people fairly? What about an owner's rep? If your client is hiring an outside party to be an owner's project manager or an owner's rep, that adds another element to the process. And does that person or company have the authority to make decisions on behalf of the owner? Or are they just a barrier between you and the ultimate decision maker? Within a large, complex owner organization, which is common amongst, higher education institutions, healthcare institutions, corporations, they have a staff of owners, project managers, internal. And maybe even though they have standard operating procedures, maybe they don't all behave the same. Do you know who specifically you are going to be working with? And of course, the contractors and construction manager members, are these all under your control as a general contractor or construction manager, or is the owner going to be hiring certain trades, certain specialties directly? Adding to the complexity of projects are sustainable design, resilient design goals, entitlements or other financing criteria. This means public money that's going into a project, whether it's state funding, local funding, federal funding that helps enable the overall financing of a project. And the public approval process, which can be arduous and long, depending on if there's planning committees involved or zoning changes that need to be made or complexities in that entitlement process. So risk allocation. The purpose of contracts is to allocate risk to the party that is best able to manage those risks and accept those risks. And the risks to the contractor are significant. Here's a cover sheet of the A201, General Conditions of the Contract for Construction. And this is for conventional design, bid, build, delivery. It's also common and almost identical for construction manager as constructor, also known as construction manager at risk or CMGC. And it's very thorough in terms of the responsibility for the means, methods, and procedures of construction, coordination of subcontractors, site safety, warranties and guarantees for the work, and timeliness of performance. And those, half a dozen bullet points are greater detailed in 41 pages of general conditions. Those 41 pages also include the roles and responsibilities of the owner and the architect, and by implication, the engineers that work for the architect on a vertical construction project. So you need to understand these documents, you need to understand these responsibilities, and the key members of your staff need to understand that as well. Particularly when you are providing pre-construction services, which is common in construction management delivery. You need to really understand the scope of services and responsibilities that you are obligated to provide, those that you will provide, and those that you won't provide. So you should list those out. There are schedules within these documents to confirm that scope of services and pre-construction. You should list the applicable construction and contract documents that apply to the project once you have been awarded a project and are entering into the actual construction contract that refers to the general conditions. Also very important is a change management protocol and approval process if project criteria or duties are modified. So this is not construction change orders. Those are obviously within the body of the A201. But what about your pre-construction services is when things in the pre-construction phase change and you, who are basically providing professional services in pre-construction, have a modification to your responsibilities. You want to disclaim services that belong to others, whether it be the owner, design professionals retained by the owner, government agencies, and other authorities having jurisdiction over the project. This is commonly including things like geotechnical information, environmental assessments, construction material testing, surveys, and other specific information relative to the site and the process that should be provided by the owner under direct contract to consultants that specialize in that. And you as the contractor, as well as the design firms, need to be able to rely upon that owner-provided information as being accurate and complete. And then finally, on this page, when bidding public work, you must be responsive to the contract requirements and the bidding document requirements. You must be responsive and responsible. I was just talking with an architect earlier today about a situation they had where they had to make a recommendation to an owner on a public bid project where the low bid contractor had exceptions to the plans and specifications and the bidding documents. They had alternative approaches that they wanted to utilize as part of their base bid. And while under the bidding documents, it would have been okay for them to include those alternatives as an alternative and then bid on the product the way the plans and specs and other contract documents called for it, they did not do that. So the architect had to make a recommendation to the owner that this, this bid was not responsive or responsible, and that the owner needed to make a decision whether to accept the bid or to move on to the second bidder. The owner decided to move on to the second bidder, and the low bidder has filed a legal challenge to it. And through my experience, having gone through this a couple times on other public projects, the contractor will not be successful in being awarded that project, and there will be a process of legal challenge and money spent on attorneys and other things. So again, public work has specific requirements that private bids do not. Private bids allow more flexibility. Public work in general does not. So be careful about that. When you're looking at your contracts, be wary of certain contract clauses such as indemnification. This is when you have to step into the shoes of an owner and defend them or indemnify them based on a risk that they should rightfully be taking. So you have to be very careful about limiting your indemnification obligations. There are anti-indemnity statutes in many states. They vary from state to state. So again, this is where your attorney, being familiar with those laws and the jurisdiction, need to be consulted. Limitations of liability are an excellent risk management strategy that can balance risk-reward considerations, particularly when your services are limited in scope. Waiver of consequential damages has become an industry standard clause. It's a very significant and important limitation of liability. It has been part of the AIA document since 1997 and was actually driven by the construction industry due to a very bad claim against a well-established general contractor on a casino project that was assigned, something like $30 million in damages due to lost revenue for a casino that was delivered 1 month late. So you don't anticipate those kinds of damages. You anticipate actual damages, but not the consequences, such as lost revenue, profit, reputation. Those can be astronomical. And so do your best to maintain those waivers of consequential damages in your construction comments. We provide the same advice for design professionals. And then finally, in this category, waiver of subrogation. This can help minimize lawsuits and claims when there's a property loss. In other words, somewhere down the road, there's been damage to a building and a property insurance carrier has had to put some money into a building to fix it. Oftentimes they will try to subrogate against a contractor or an architect or engineer and their insurance companies. And a waiver of subrogation clause, which again is very common, can be helpful in minimizing this exposure. I say can be because our experience has been that it's not definite that it will. Every claim is different. There are nuances to them, and we try in contract language to protect the parties, but sometimes things happen in litigation and in arbitration that are unpredictable. We do want you to be managing fast track and innovative project system risk. There are clauses that we offer in terms of contract guidance that really makes the owner aware that what are the risks of fast track and accelerated delivery. And quite frankly, what project these days is not being delivered on an accelerated manner. So if you're bidding, foundations and structural steel before the building is fully designed, and you get the steel on site or you get a mill order and it's in fabrication, and then maybe one of the exit stairs moves, maybe some of the vertical duct shafts move, and maybe they don't move that much, but they move enough where it creates a change in the structural steel. And so that's going to create a cost. It's going to create a change order cost to that previous phase of bidding. The owner needs to be aware of it. They need to know that it's their risk to take that because they are benefiting from the acceleration of the project schedule. How much money are they saving to bring their commercial or revenue generating building to the market, 3 months earlier, 6 months earlier? They're saving a lot of money that way by generating revenue. So that's part of the risk that they have to accept. As far as innovative product and system risk, this gets to sustainable design, sustainable goals such as LEED certification, well building, very high-end things like net zero. There are risks involved in that, and innovative products and systems that are utilized. You have to be proceeding with those types of products and systems with the awareness in the informed consent of the owner. It starts on the design side, but continues through the construction side to make the owner aware and get them to sign on to the fact that maybe in order to attain these sustainable goals, you have to use some products and systems that are not as time tested and proven as all the buildings you've done in the last 25 or 30 years. But you have confidence in them, but the owner is accepting the risk of that. And finally, don't work without a contract. Make sure you have at least some sort of letter authorization, some sort of interim agreement that enables you to get started on a project. If it's going to take some time to negotiate the full agreement, don't let this run too long, 30 days, 60 days. But if the owner wants you to start, you need to define what you're doing, what your scope is, what deliverables you may have, whether that be a cost estimate, whether that be a comment on the owner's program or the architect's preliminary design. And you need to be paid for that, and you need to be paid timely. So, of course, it's always better to get the full contract done before you start, but if not, make sure you have a valid letter of authorization to get going. So, here's what AI construction agreements look like. This is the A201 family. There's the A201 document in the middle. It is triggered by the A101, A102, or A103 agreement. A101 being a lump sum or fixed price agreement, A102 and A103 being cost plus agreements, and one with a GMP and one without. And then there are a series of exhibits on the right side, which a couple of these are new. We're new in the 2017 family, particularly the A101 insurance exhibit, the exhibit of insurance and bonds. And amongst the documents committee, there was a specialized group working on this for a number of years. Construction insurance has become complex. My colleagues in Berkeley Construction Professional deal with this all the time. There are many different products available, and your insurance broker, your client's insurance broker, should work with the owner to determine what levels of insurance and types of insurance they have. And it'll be a separate agreement, exhibit rather, because of the definition that's necessary. Now, in A201, there are basic insurance requirements defined, CGL, auto, workers' comp, things like that. So, but what A101 further defines are things such as professional liability insurance, and contractors have professional liability exposure, and that's what we sell in terms of Berkeley Construction Professional. E204 is the exhibit for sustainable projects. It is the exhibit that defines the roles and responsibilities of the owner, architect, engineer, and contractor or construction manager for to attain a sustainable project goal. And then E203 are the digital practice agreements, those that define, particularly for building information modeling, the allowable use, intended use, and protocols and procedures for using digital information, including building information modeling. And you can see that there's a date of 2013 on that, and we are currently in 2022, so that's an indication that the digital practice documents are being drafted right now for an update that hopefully will be released no later than next year. Digital practice has evolved quite significantly since 2017. We expected that, and AIA will certainly do an excellent job of updating those documents and providing education for the design, construction, and owner industry to understand what those changes are. So in a slightly different format here are the AIA CMC agreement relationships. And again, you can see in the middle, the A201 general conditions are very similar because in CMC, also known as CMAR and CMGC, the construction manager is the constructor, whereas in construction manager is advisor, which I'm not detailing here. They're a pure professional relationship. So a little bit of a difference in the owner-architect agreement, the B133, which recognizes that construction manager as a consultant to the owner during the pre-construction phases. Otherwise, relationships between the CMC and subcontractors through the A401 and the architect and its consultants through the C401 are the same. And again, you can see these same exhibits on the right side for BIM, sustainable projects, and insurance and bonds. Okay, so our third item, and one that again we know is a significant challenge in the industry, is maintaining proper staff, maintaining continuity of management at the project level. The success of a project starts at the top. The contractors, project executive, and project manager, project superintendent. If you're assigning project engineers as part of the construction team, they should be experienced in that project type. And they have to be supported at the staff level and the executive level. So I know all of you are dealing with this. Common responses to this need to retain and recruit new staff include providing an attractive and supportive work environment through your company's culture, establishing a vision and mission that resonates with younger people. The millennial generation, the generation that's younger than the millennials, that's entering or has entered the workforce. Providing proper facilities. Maybe it's not as easy in a construction company to do work from home or remote work. The design industry and many other industries have been able to adapt to this very much, but construction really is a hands-on business, and so you're going to have to navigate younger employees and even more experienced employees really getting used to what we've been doing the last 2.5 years in terms of working from home with robust computer networks, wide area networks, good systems to enable the efficiency of work from people from a remote location. So that consideration is something you'll have to work out within your firm. And of course, the benefits you provide, to your firm, whether they be healthcare, 401k, profit sharing, and the like. The other thing we think is important is to invest in your staff through training and development. I think employees really appreciate this. You know, they know that they're developing professionally, and that's going to help them throughout their career. We'd like to see you embed quality management in your company culture. It be a part of your core values and project delivery, no matter what the project type. As far as also working with firms, enhancing the odds for project success, I think I mentioned this earlier, by working with design professionals, subcontractors, and others that have experience and expertise in the project type. Don't be afraid to make a no-go decision when the project client or team members are not the right fit for your practical and strategic goals. Also, if there are aspects of the client itself in terms of their character, in terms of the project, in terms of the reality of the budget and schedule, and goals. So we have a checklist available. It's more focused on the design side on this website right here. And it's very adaptable to a construction contractor in terms of making a go, no-go decision. So no matter what we are trying to get you to do is to consider all these factors and make an informed business decision whether to proceed with a project that is the right fit for your strategic goals and the practical ability of you to implement that project in a successful manner, including profitability. So relative to the design team members, are they collaborative? Are they treating people fairly? They have an ethical observation, design professionals do, to treat everybody fairly and in balance. Yes, they're hired by the owner and they're under contract to the owner, but they have a responsibility to you as a contractor and to other aspects of the public, and it's just a professional responsibility that exists. And does that carry over into what they're doing in terms of their timely response and fair response to submittals, RFIs, and change requests? Are they processing fairly change orders in a timely manner? So we recommend that you proactively expand and enhance relationships with the leading design firms in the project types and locations of the business where you exist. That's because they're going to be having a lot of projects, right? And they will have influence with the owner in terms of who is going to be selected as a contractor or a CM. Just like you, when you've established a very strong relationship with an owner, and maybe you're the first party to the table, you're part of the owner's team. That design firm wants to make sure that they have a relationship with you so that they can work collaboratively with you and the owner on successful projects going forward. So a critical issue for general contractors and construction managers that are constructors are making sure that your subs live by the same rules that you do under your owner-contractor agreement and the general conditions. Philosophically, as well as practically, you want to be using subcontractors that are providing quality construction and diligent client service. We want them to stand behind their work, respond to your schedule needs, and your realistic demands. Contractual responsibility and terms and conditions must flow down to your subcontractors. I mentioned limitations of liability earlier in the program. Please do not offer those to your subcontractors or any subconsultants unless you have a similar contractual protection in your agreement with the owner. Otherwise, you may be limiting liability to a party that is truly responsible for the risk, for the claim that may come that's emanating out of that subcontracted service. Your subcontractors need to promote a safe and collaborative work environment. They need to follow the procedures and protocols for safety that you have established as a general contractor. You may have enhanced requirements for them to establish their own safety procedures for their particular discipline. That's part of your overall business policies and practices. And we'd like to see you have some subcontractors that understand the big picture, that they're not just focused on their own trade, but realize that they're part of a team that needs to work effectively for a successful project. So finally, in this section, critically important is insurance. Your subcontractors and maybe there's a professional consultant that you are retaining, they need to be properly insured for commercial general liability, environmental pollution, and professional liability insurance. You should establish criteria for policy limits and track compliance with those insurance requirements by making sure you get insurance certificates updated every year, to make sure you actually, in many cases, actually see the policy to make sure that that coverage is there. We have faced several claims in the Berkeley Construction Professional where a subcontractor represented that they had pollution liability or that they had professional liability, but in fact, they did not. Pollution liability often comes from things that are happening on the roof. Subcontractor installing a cell phone tower and perhaps had to cut through the roof and didn't properly put temporary protection in, and water leaked in, got into the attic space, got in the insulation, the roof got sealed up, but the moisture inside the building never got dealt with, created a mold situation, which is a pollution situation, and a pretty big liability. And it's a big liability for the general contractor if that subcontractor installing that cell tower and damaging that roof was not insured for pollution. And in this case, they were not, and it became something that flowed to the general contractor. Similarly, professional liability. Some contractors don't realize that they do have professional liability exposure. Historically, it's been common for structural steel fabricators and erectors that do the final engineering of structural steel framing plans and erection. Similarly for prefabricated metal stairs. Similarly for prefabricated railing systems, particularly these, aluminum, steel, and glass railing systems where final engineering and design is done by the supplier and subcontractor. That creates a professional liability. Exterior wall components. Again, traditionally curtain wall, final design, that liability has been common really in my entire career and even beyond for about 50 years, the final design of curtain walls. But that continues on to other aspects of exterior envelope and the way those are put together. So be very careful about that. You want your subcontractors to be properly insured. And if you're in the design build mode and you're hiring the design consultants, which you are, because that's what design build is all about, be careful about the limitations of an engineer's policy that you might be having underneath you, as well as the architect. Understand the scope and complexity of the project and that potential liability that may exist. So again, understand your project, work with your own insurance broker, work with these subconsultants and subcontractors to get them to the proper levels and types of insurance. Okay, our last section is managing quality and project delivery. As I mentioned earlier, standard procedures, policy, and protocols of a contractor should establish robust quality standards and controls that really exist from the start of the project all the way through project completion, including into the warranty period and callbacks that you may have as an obligation under the warranties that are part of the contract. You want to foster an environment where meeting the client expectations and contractual responsibilities is a primary duty. It's not just about making money, okay? We know you need to make money. We know your subcontractors need to make money. It's critical, but it has to be done in a manner where your client is happy, or else you won't get called back for that second project, or you may fail a claim, be subject to a claim due to unmet expectations. So maybe there's an occasion where you do have to accept some financial compromise in the short term in order to protect your reputation, client reputation over the long term. This may have to do with a finish trade, something, maybe some custom cabinetry that's put in place, maybe some finished flooring, maybe some aspects of the ceiling and the detailing, the lighting that's just not quite right from the perspective of your client. They want something to be fixed. And you could make an argument, no, it meets the standards, and, I don't want to come back and do it. But again, think about the long-term relationship that you have. And I'm not saying volunteer to do a bunch of work for free, but you've got to analyze this over the long term of your client relationship and satisfying the expectations of your client on that particular project. So thorough communication and sharing of best practices within your firm is very helpful. You learn from every project. Let's not just bury those lessons learned into the project experience that you have, but have a situation within your company where you've got maybe some post-occupancy or post-project completion discussions amongst the project team and certain other members of your construction firm. We say the same thing for design firms. You're going to learn on every project, And while you have to be careful the way you document things to not create a paper trail that's exposing you to liability, the advantage of lessons learned to promote best practices going forward outweighs the risk of not talking about it at all. In the quality process, you should consider peer reviews within your own firm. In other words, having maybe a project executive or a project engineer from another project look over what you are doing, what your project plan is, what the experiences that you have had on that project. An internal peer review is very helpful, not only to gain the expertise that exists within your firm, but again, to share lessons learned within your company. And by rotating that responsibility within your company, it refreshes people's minds and their perspectives. So it's very, very helpful. So documentation of the project process and establishment of the project record is very important. It's the primary duty of the design professional until the project goes under construction. Now, if you have in the construction management world, or if you've been selected as a general contractor with pre-construction services, you may have your own project documentation processes that you want to follow. I'm not necessarily saying you need to have a parallel set of meeting minutes, but you really need to look carefully at those meeting minutes and conference reports and other documents that the architects and engineers and owners are providing as they impact project criteria and the services that you are providing. Once the project is under construction, we do recommend that the contractor or CM be the primary documenter of the project process. And again, there's value in being the author of the project record. You have to share those notes with the design team, with the owner's team on a contemporaneous basis, meaning within a few days of a meeting or a field report or things like that. You have to give them the opportunity to respond within a certain number of days before it becomes part of the project record. So some firms establish a risk register to understand and manage elevated risks. Fast track projects, which I mentioned earlier, often require field changes that may result in unintended consequences. That is, change orders for work that's already been in place. Projects that involve untested technologies or cutting-edge design can be inherently risky as well, as I mentioned, relative to sustainable goals. And then while challenging projects can be exciting, and they test your firm's skills and keep your firm sharp, you do need to fully understand them and be prepared to diligently manage the associated risks. We are dealing with some really complex projects these days, particularly in public infrastructure, particularly with the expansion and popularity of design build, which is increasing risk to contractors that are acting as the design build lead. And having a risk register and being proactive and trying to identify the risks that may occur on a project, and as they occur, to address them proactively. I think one of the things you'll need to do is establish internal contingencies to deal with cost elements that you will not be able to recover from an owner as a change order. So that's your business in terms of the way you're managing your construction budgets, managing contingencies that are included in construction management, project delivery types. Who has got control of the contingencies? Does the owner have a contingency? Do you as the contractor or CM have a contingency? It's got to be proactively managed. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We're still going to have about 7 or 8 minutes left for Q&A, Hosky. So what we've done is we've talked about staying focused. We've talked about the importance of contracting and project approval, critical importance of staff resources and working with firms you know, the active and diligent management of your subcontractors, and managing quality and project delivery. So a number of resources are available to you on our public website, berkeleycp.com/risk management, including that risk management plan outline that I mentioned at the beginning, and other very interesting articles and even some presentations regarding topics that we have discussed today. AIA has significant resources on their Learn page. AIA over the last couple of years has been focusing on adding more resources to be beneficial to the construction community. The contracts have always been robust for the construction industry, and here are some of those emails. So again, I appreciate AIA inviting me in to offer my expertise on the construction side. Here is my contact information. The best way to reach me is by email. And with that, I will turn it back to Hospi.
Andy, excellent presentation. Thank you very much for taking the time to present this to our viewers. As Andy mentioned, if you'd like to ask him any questions at the conclusion of today's webinar, feel free to reach out to him. If you have any questions about AIA contract documents, you can reach out to docinfo@aia.org. So with that, thank you to Andy, and thank you for all of our viewers for attending today's webinar. Have a great day.